My sister's voice was sharp over the phone. It's only for family, Wendy. I froze, my stomach twisting in a way I'd learned to recognize but never accept. I'm Wendy Cole, 30 years old, a photographer in Eugene, Oregon. And in that single sentence, my sister Cheryl had managed to tell me I wasn't. It's only for family. The word circled back to me as I sat in my studio, surrounded by cameras and editing equipment, and the life I'd built with my own hands. Our parents' 30th anniversary party was happening that weekend in Portland, 50 miles away, 2 hours by car. A drive I'd made countless times for their emergencies, their needs, their last-minute requests. But not for this. Cheryl, 33, had always been the voice of our family. A regional theater actress, she commanded attention the way some people breathed. Her name glowed on marquees. Her reviews were clipped and framed in our parents' living room. When Donna and Wesley Foster thought of their children, they thought of Cheryl first. Cheryl's rehearsal, Cheryl's audition, Cheryl's opening night. I was the daughter they called when the roof needed fixing. 2 summers ago, I'd written a check for $15,000. The house was falling apart. Sagging porch, rotting beams, crumbling shingles. My parents had mentioned it in passing, almost apologetic, and I'd felt the pull. So I'd called my bank, transferred the money, and heard my mother's voice shift into something that sounded like gratitude. You're so good to us, Wendy. Not thank you. Not we're grateful. You're so good to us, as if giving was simply what I did, what I was built for. A year before that, my brother Zachary had been drowning. A lawyer in New York, brilliant and driven, but buried in law school debt. His voice on the phone was tight with shame. I covered 10,000 of his loans. His response came back as a text. Thanks, sis. Nothing more. Then there were the smaller things. The things that added up without adding to anything. Money for new curtains. Money for their kitchen remodel. Money for Cheryl's costume repairs when her theater budget fell short. Money for Mom's medical deductible. Money for Dad's car repair. Every time I said yes, the next ask came faster. Last month, Mom had texted asking for $2,000 to spruce up the anniversary party. I was stretched thin. My photography business was growing but slowly, and my savings had become a family emergency fund nobody acknowledged as such. I sent it anyway. Then came Cheryl's call. Could you cover airfare for Aunt Linda from California? Only $1,200. I'd hesitated. Aunt Linda wasn't close and I was already underwater. I'd said no. For the first time in years I'd said no. Cheryl's response had stung. Wow. Wendy, way to let us down. That guilt had sat in my chest like a stone for 3 days. But I didn't cave. I couldn't afford to. A week later, another text from Mom. $500 more for catering. I sent it, though I shouldn't have. And then Cheryl again, her tone bright and casual. Could you chip in for a band? Just $1,000. It's for Mom and Dad. I'd refused. And her silence after that refusal had felt louder than any words. They didn't see my contributions as generosity. They saw them as obligation. I was the one who made it possible for them to do what they wanted, to be who they wanted to be, while I disappeared into the work of making it happen. So when Cheryl called that Thursday afternoon with her actress charm already wound-tight, I'd braced myself. But nothing prepared me for the words she chose. It's only for family. My hands gripped the desk. The irony was almost cruel. I'd spent years proving I was family through every currency that mattered: time, money, sacrifice. I'd driven Dad to doctor's appointments when his car broke down. I'd stayed up late editing photos to meet deadlines while juggling their requests. I'd been there. But I wasn't family enough for their party. Cheryl was still talking, something about Mom being too busy to call herself, about how this was a small thing, just the immediate relatives. Her words sounded rehearsed, like she'd practiced them before dialing. The performance of it made my skin prickle. I'd asked her once why the party was so important, why so much was riding on it. She'd said our parents deserved a day that was perfect, that reflected their love. I'd agreed. I'd even helped pay for it. But apparently my presence would spoil the picture. After I hung up, I didn't cry. Crying was what they expected. Crying was what would bring the calls back, the apologies, the explanations that weren't really explanations. Instead, I felt something else. A cold clarity that had been building for years, finally breaking the surface. I sat in my studio for an hour, scrolling through my phone. Photos of Cheryl's shows, shared by my parents. Articles about Zachary's legal victories, forwarded with pride. My own gallery opening from 2 years ago. 300 people came, the show sold out, and my parents had texted that evening saying they were proud, but something had come up and they couldn't make it. Something always came up. That Friday my cousin Faye called. She worked as an accountant in Portland and had been helping with some last-minute party details for my parents. "Wendy, you won't believe what I just found out," she said, her voice tight with anger I didn't expect. Faye had been coordinating the guest list and discovered the real scope of the event. 50 guests. A live jazz band. A private restaurant in downtown Portland with chandeliers and a balcony. Booked months in advance. Thousands of dollars spent on an event that Cheryl had described to me as a small family gathering. And my name was nowhere on the list. A small family gathering. My sister's words came back to me, and I understood what had happened. This wasn't a miscommunication. This was deliberate. Calculated. They'd lied to me about the scale of the party to keep me away. I'd sent money for this. I'd funded their perfect celebration, and they decided I didn't deserve to be part of it. I called Cheryl that evening, my heart pounding. When she answered, her tone was breezy, like nothing was wrong. "Cheryl," I said, cutting through her greeting. "Faye told me about the party. 50 guests. A jazz band. Why did you lie about it being just family?" There was a pause. Then her voice changed, sharpened into something colder. "Oh, Wendy, don't be so dramatic. It's a special day for Mom and Dad. You're too independent, always off doing your own thing. You wouldn't fit the vibe." Fit the vibe. The words hit like a slap. I'd spent my entire life bending to their needs. I'd made the drive to Portland more times than I could count. I'd answered calls at midnight, rushed to emergencies, moved money and time and energy in whatever direction they pointed. But I was too independent. "I sent thousands for this party," I said, keeping my voice level. "I deserved to be there." She laughed. A short, cutting sound that made my jaw clench. "You're making this about you as usual," she said. "Just let Mom and Dad have their moment." I ended the call. My hands were shaking, but not with sadness. With anger. With clarity. This was the moment everything shifted. I sat at my kitchen table that night, staring at nothing. Around me, my apartment was quiet, filled with the evidence of a life I'd built for myself. Photography equipment I'd saved for years to buy. Prints of my work framed on the walls. A life that was mine, that they'd always treated as secondary. But what if it didn't have to be secondary anymore? What if I stopped waiting for their approval and simply built something better? I called Heidi, my best friend who worked in travel. "I need to leave," I told her. "Somewhere far. Somewhere just for me." "Paris," Heidi said without hesitation. "You need Paris." By midnight, she'd booked me a first-class ticket departing Sunday morning. A boutique hotel in Le Marais with a rooftop view. Private tour. A week away from Eugene, from my family's gravity, from the person I'd been forced to become in their orbit. "You deserve this," Heidi had said. "This is your moment." I packed Saturday night, choosing my camera lenses carefully. I'd spent years using photography as an escape, a way to see the world on my own terms. This trip wasn't a getaway. It was a reclamation. Sunday morning, I boarded the flight without telling my family where I was going. My phone was in airplane mode. My family didn't know. The party was happening that very afternoon in Portland, and I was already thousands of miles away, finally choosing myself. As the plane lifted off, I felt something I hadn't in years. Not anger anymore. Anticipation. The promise of a life that didn't revolve around their expectations. But what I didn't know yet was that my absence would be louder than any argument I could have made. That Sunday afternoon in Portland, my parents' anniversary party was in full swing. 50 guests filled a downtown restaurant, their laughter mingling with live jazz. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over white linens and flowers. My sister Cheryl had orchestrated it all with her usual precision, every detail a reflection of her theatrical vision. Meanwhile, I was standing at the base of the Eiffel Tower, my camera raised to catch the light just right. That evening, I posted 3 photos to my social media. The iron lattice of the tower glowing against a clear sky. A cafe along the Seine, steam rising from a coffee cup. A street corner in Le Marais where golden hour painted the buildings amber. The caption was simple: chasing joy in Paris. I didn't mention my family. I didn't air their betrayal or explain my absence. The post was just about me, about choosing myself, about a life being lived on my own terms for the first time in years. I hit share and put my phone down, finishing a glass of wine as the city lights sparked outside my hotel window. I didn't know what was happening back in Portland. I didn't know that my post was already spreading through social media, reaching friends of friends, distant relatives, church members who were at that very party. The images of me in Paris, radiant, free, present, stood in sharp contrast to the lie Cheryl had told about a small family gathering. Whispers started. Questions began. Why wasn't Wendy there? Where was she? My cousin Faye was at the party, watching it all unfold. She texted me later that night, messages coming in bursts. Your post is everywhere. People are talking. It's tense here. Mrs. Janet Ward, a pillar of the church community and someone who didn't tolerate falsehood, had cornered my mother near the dessert table. She'd seen my post on her phone just minutes before. Donna, she said, her voice cutting through the music, why is your daughter in Paris while you're throwing a lavish party without her? My mother's face had flushed. The room felt the shift. Heads turned. Conversations paused. Wendy's so busy, Mom had stammered, but the excuse sounded hollow. We didn't want to burden her. Mrs. Ward's eyes narrowed. Burden her? She's your daughter. You don't exclude family from a day like this. The party continued, but the energy had changed. A family friend left early, murmuring something about drama. Another guest asked Cheryl directly why I wasn't invited. Cheryl tried to laugh it off, but her smile faltered as more eyes turned her way, skeptical. By the time Faye texted me the details, the party was already crumbling. Several guests had left. The band played on, but the celebration that was supposed to honor my parents' love felt fractured now, weighed down by questions nobody wanted to answer. Monday morning, my phone lit up with calls. Mom's voice came first, tight and controlled. Nothing like the warm tone she usually used with me. Wendy, your post ruined everything, she said. Guests left the party early because of you. How could you be so thoughtless? I was in my Paris hotel room, the city still waking up outside my window. I'd been so far away from them, and yet my simple choice to be happy had somehow found its way into their perfect celebration and exposed every lie they'd told. Mom, I didn't mention the party, I said, keeping my voice even. I only shared my joy. Maybe people left because they saw the truth. She gasped, then hung up. Cheryl called next, her voice dripping with accusation and something else, desperation. Your little stunt turned the party into a disaster, she snapped. Everyone was whispering about you not being there. You made Mom and Dad look awful. I could picture her, probably pacing somewhere, her actress instincts trying to stage manage the damage. Cheryl, you lied about the party being just family, I said. I didn't do that. She ignored me. Just take the post down, okay? For Mom and Dad. The audacity was almost stunning. After years of me bending to their demands, she thought I'd cave. No, I said quietly. This is my life. I'm not taking it down. There was silence on the line, then a click as she hung up. Zachary called minutes later, his voice carrying that practice calm he used in his law office, the tone he used on problems he could solve with the right argument. "Wendy, you stirred up unnecessary drama," he said. "You could have just talked to us." "Talked to you?" I asked. "You all lied to me, Zachary. I'm done." He sighed, disappointed, as if I was a client who wasn't being reasonable. "You're blowing this out of proportion." I ended the call before he could lecture me further. What I didn't expect was how quickly the consequences would follow. By Wednesday, Faye texted me with news. Cheryl had lost a major theater role. The director, a friend of a church member who'd been at the party, had heard about how my sister excluded me. Word travels fast in Portland. They decided they couldn't trust her judgment, couldn't work with someone capable of that kind of betrayal. Cheryl's reputation, built on years of glowing reviews and leading roles, took a visible hit. She was suddenly auditioning for smaller productions, her spotlight dimmed. Zachary's fall was more professional but no less real. His social media post, "Some people thrive on drama, choosing selfies over family," had been seen by a colleague at his New York law firm. That colleague had flagged it to HR as unprofessional conduct damaging to the firm's image. Zachary was called into a meeting with his boss. The promotion he'd been hoping for, the one he'd been quietly working toward, was gone. He'd tried to paint me as the villain, and it had cost him more than he'd bargained for. Back in Portland, my parents felt the sting differently. Their church community, the tight circle that had defined their social life for decades, began pulling away. Mrs. Ward didn't let the story go. She shared it with others, framing it as a betrayal of family values. At their weekly potluck, several members skipped my parents' table. A longtime choir member told my mother directly, "You should have invited Wendy. It wasn't right." My mother tried to brush it off with a smile, but her hands shook as she served pie. I wasn't reveling in their suffering. I was simply no longer carrying the weight of their choices. For the first time, they were facing consequences that had nothing to do with me fixing things or softening the blow. A week later, my phone buzzed with an email from a gallery owner in Portland. She'd seen my Paris photos circulating online and was impressed by the work. She wanted to talk about a solo exhibit. A few days after that, a magazine editor called. She'd been following the social media conversation around my Paris post and wanted to commission a series of photo essays for an international travel publication. The magazine contract was substantial, a dream I'd tucked away years ago, thinking it would never happen. I spent the next 2 months building a new life. I worked with the gallery on my solo exhibit, selecting images that captured not just Paris, but my sense of self rediscovered. I planned trips to Rome and Lisbon for the magazine series, my camera ready to capture stories that belonged to me. My phone still had my family's contact information, but I'd stopped answering their calls. My mother's messages, long and pleading, asking for a family meeting to fix things. My father's voicemail, his voice heavy with the weight of consequences he didn't understand. Cheryl's emails, a mix of charm and desperation, asking me to move past this. Zachary had stopped trying after his firm's warning. I blocked their numbers, not out of anger but clarity. They'd shown me exactly who they were, and I was done trying to fit into their version of family. My inbox now filled with opportunities instead of their demands. Client inquiries from photographers who'd seen my work, gallery invitations, messages of support from people who understood what it meant to choose yourself. By spring, my solo exhibit opened to a full gallery. People came, friends, colleagues, clients, strangers who'd followed my story online. My photos filled the walls, each one a testament to a life being built without apologies. Looking back, I could see the lesson clearly, though it wasn't the kind you learn in a moment. It's something you understand slowly, through every choice you make to honor yourself instead of their expectations. For years, I'd believed that love meant sacrifice without limit, that loyalty meant erasing my own needs, that family meant giving until there was nothing left to give. But their betrayal, the exclusion, the lies, the blame showed me otherwise. Happiness wasn't going to come from their approval. It was never theirs to give. It was mine all along. In my camera. In my vision. In the choices I made when nobody was watching to judge them. I found it in the streets of Paris, in the lens of my camera, in the quiet strength of walking away from people who'd taken my generosity for granted and mistaken my kindness for weakness. My family is still in Portland. Cheryl is rebuilding her career one smaller role at a time. Zachary keeps his head down at work, his future trajectory permanently altered by a moment of poor judgment. My parents attend church events where people are cordial but distant, their social standing never quite recovering. I don't think about them anymore. Not with anger, not with hurt, not even with satisfaction at their consequences. I simply don't think about them. I'm too busy living the life I'm building, too focused on the work I'm creating, too invested in the person I've become when nobody's demands are pulling me away from myself. That's the real victory. Not their suffering, not their regret, but my freedom.